So now, in the wake of a national tragedy like Wednesday's fatal plane and helicopter collision in D.C., most elected officials put politics aside, wait for answers, and let people grieve. And then there's Trump. Watch.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite.
I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense.
They beg to differ. Now, victims were still being taken out of the Potomac while he was saying this. This is an opinion show, so what's your opinion, ladies?
Well, beyond the egregious and illogical jump to DEI was the continual and predictable lack of impulse control by someone with the largest mic and the largest audience of anyone in the world. And while the bodies were being recovered, when he said these remarks, the bodies were not even all recovered. So step one in a tragedy is to mourn, to wait for these families. There are people that still don't even...
What happened to thoughts and prayers? That's usually the first thing.
That's only when children are shot.
There are people, though, that are being notified that their loved one's not coming home. This is not the time. Let's let all that dust settle. It's like the wildfires when they started while they're burning, people are trying to blame game it. I think Trump also posted soon after this tragedy occurred and said that this seems like it should have been avoidable. The worst thing you can say to someone who just lost a loved one is without any evidence that it could have been avoided. And let us remember that even the most highly trained and skilled workers in this world, from surgeons to, I guess you could say even recreationally, race car drivers, everyone makes mistakes. We don't know why this accident happened. And the loose way he speaks about it without any knowledge is heartbreaking.
Disgraceful.
Well, you know, part of being president requires being the consoler in chief. And at times of national mourning and national grief, America looks to the president to hold us and to give us some hope and some optimism and embrace us. And as there are 67 families, 67 victims with loved ones and friends and wives and husbands and parents grieving and still being taken out of the river, this man goes out there and says this. I mean, when you talk about DEI and Trump, it means despicable, enraging idiocy. That's what his DEI means. You know, and he's talking about DEI. And this is the guy who just, replaced Lloyd Austin, who had a 41-year career, 4-star general, with Pete Hegseth.
Yeah.
Who even 3 Republicans voted against. So you want to talk about merit versus just being weighed on loyalty, but I want to read what Pete Buttigieg, who was one of the people that Trump attacked, just said. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, I'm not going to dignify his remarks about DEI. I'm not going to do that. But to Anna's point, just last week, Trump fired the heads of the Transportation Security Administration and Coast Guard, and he also eliminated all the members of a key aviation security advisory group. The Aviation Security Committee will technically continue to exist, but it won't have any members to carry out the work of examining safety issues at airlines and airports. I think that is very telling that when voters decide that they want someone to blow things up and they want someone to blow up infrastructures, this is the result. You cannot blow up infrastructures and take people that have real experience in these types of issues and think that good things will happen because of it. So And I will also say that his transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, said that everything was standard in the lead up to the crash. That is from his own Secretary of Transportation, who replaced Pete Buttigieg.
And the reality is, as Donald Trump acknowledged when he walked out, is that he still does not know the cause of this, that there's an ongoing investigation. The Army, the Pentagon are looking into it. I think any attempts to swiftly blame Donald Trump are wrong, and it's even more ridiculous that he, as the president of the United States, then tries to point to DEI when he has no information to back that is in fact what caused this accident. It's so tragic. I've flown that airport more times than I can count. I've actually flown on Blackhawks from the Pentagon in that very airspace. These are some of the safest, these are very skilled pilots. It's a horrible tragedy. We'll learn more as the investigation unfolds. But one of the things that bothers me about Trump and that I've expressed in the lead up to this election is he floods the zone. We should be calling this out. This is a worthy discussion. But there were also yesterday incredibly important and consequential confirmation hearings happening on Capitol Hill. Right. And a lot of folks are going to hear about this press conference, and they're not going to know that Tulsi Gabbard was asked 5 times to say whether or not what Edward Snowden did was treasonous, and that his decision to flee to Russia after releasing American secrets put us in danger. RFK Jr. was up, as well as Kash Patel for FBI director. And I don't think that this is a strategy for Donald Trump per se, but it has this unintended consequence of people then not paying attention to things which will have real impacts on Americans because they're so caught up in just the crazy of the news cycle and how he floods the zone.
Well,
so people need to pay
part
attention.
Of this whole thing he's saying about DEI, et cetera, is a distraction from exactly what you're saying?
And I don't know if it's
Senator
intentional,
Warren
but it
said.
is a distraction.
Well, it's also his pet project because he, on some of his first executive orders, addressed DEI. So to say it was DEI that caused it, he once again becomes the person who will save.